right, congratulations to WAPTEC and Performance Team. Now let's explore the frontiers of AI with our Agentic AI panel. Please welcome our moderator, Vishal Gupta, and panelists.
All right, good morning, everybody. Whoop, we're not on. Good morning, everybody. While the panelists are getting set up, I'm going to go ahead and introduce them and introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Vishal Gupta. I am a professor in data science and operations at USC, and I'm affiliated to the Supply Chain Institute, and I work with Nick on part of our advanced research initiatives. We have an awesome panel this morning talking about agentic AI. So I'm going to go really briefly. If you take a look at these panelists' bios on LinkedIn, they are multi-pages. So here's your 2-sentence summary of everybody. First up, we have Manish Apte, CEO of Real Simple Labs. For the students in the audience that are interested in becoming entrepreneurs, spend 10 minutes, have a coffee with Manish. You're going to see the kind of energy and vibrance it really takes to do this. Real Simple Labs is currently developing a tool, Parker AI, for developing agentic AI tools for marketing. We have Tess Zhang, co-founder of Global Link AI. Global Link is one of the few firms that actually has a functioning, great agentic AI platform for supply chain control tower. Manju is a repeat visitor to the Global Supply Chain Summit. If you haven't met him before, he's the CEO of Pluto 7. Pluto 7 is one of Google Cloud's premier supply chain partners, again, with a fantastic agentic AI platform that if you go out to the room next door, you can see them demoing, showcasing, and talking about, called PI in a box. Yeah. Pi Agent, there we go. Okay, and then finally we have Bethany Abate, who I'm excited to have on the panel. Bethany works in AI policy. She's with the Software and Information Industry Association, SIIA, coordinating with industry, academics, and policymakers to help shape policy for AI going forward. So let's welcome all the panelists, and then we'll get started. Excuse me while I consult my notes. All right, so to get started, I think one of the themes that I thought about for this panel was really distinguishing between hype and reality when it comes to agentic AI. So to get started, I'd love to just like set the stage for everyone in the room and define what we think is agentic AI. And in particular, how does it differ from the kinds of AI we've seen in the past, meaning like ML or generative AI or ChatGPT, things like this. And for this, I want to kick it, Tess, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Hello. So basically, agentic AI is a series of actions that lead towards a certain goal. In broad definition, we do planning, decision making, integrating with other systems, but ML, large language model, is more when you get an output when prompted, right? So if we put in draw an analogy with how a team works together, is that agents are just like your teammates, right? In the context of supply chain, it's more like you have an inventory optimization agent, you have a supplier agent, you have a procurement agent, and they have to work together and towards the certain goal. But one of the issues we encounter in the context of supply chain is that each of the stakeholders has a different agenda or a different goal. So sometimes not just all the agents have to work together, but they have to debate and negotiate to reach an optimal result. So that's how our company has been positioned, our kind of agentic system.
Great, thank you. Manju, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so if you think about the evolution of AI has been evolving for 30 years. And from a rule-based system, we went into the pattern-based, we called it machine learning, and then started using more videos and images and more start getting closer to truly using artificial intelligence. But the AI agent is really about bringing your traditional, what you call RPA or task automation, now at scale, because now you can give a broader instruction and let the AI decide the tasks to some extent and put that to action and drive action. It really started manifesting better because of the way users are starting to see the interaction through a UI. Until that point, it was kind of this abstract AI is intelligent, but exactly what does it do for me? That became more evident in the last 12 months.
Excellent. So I'm hearing two kind of big themes come up here. So one is this idea of having many agents, and this nice analogy Tess has drawn. And sometimes people talk about agentic AI kind of as a conductor for an orchestra, where you have individual AI agents that are the musicians, and the agentic AI is some lead conductor orchestrating them to a common goal. And the second idea around decision making, really being that this is about doing things, about actions taking place. So this like really segues to a nice follow-up question about what are the roles of humans in agentic AI systems. Reality is not black and white. We're not going to imagine systems where humans play zero role. We're clearly not looking at systems where humans are making every decision, because that's not the point. But how do you think about where humans should be involved? When should a system flag it upwards? Things like that. Do you want to get us started, Manish?
Yeah, definitely. Hey, everyone. Yeah, on the topic of AI agents, it's pretty clear. I mean, most people here have probably used ChatGPT, and it's pretty amazing when you ask it a question and it fires off like 5 minutes of thinking on something, gives you a crazy nice report that would have taken you hours, if not days or weeks to complete, right? And so that's a representation of one agent at the top level, then firing off a bunch of different little calls to other specialized agents underneath the hood to go and do work for you. And so, in the same way you would use, say, or at least the way I think about it, right, is in the same way you would use ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you currently use to ask it to give you different versions, and then you, as a taste maker, as the person who's actually in charge of that key business decision, it's your taste, right? You just have now 5 different versions of these highly polished reports that you don't have to wait for. Whereas before you'd have to have a team of PhDs work for you for like a few weeks, and you only have one report, and you have to pay them a lot of money and stuff. And it's a crazy world we're living in now.
Yeah, so to push that further, I think this like relation to ChatGPT is great, especially because GPT-5 is an example of an agentic AI agent that's forming out a lot of things. So if you pay for GPT-5, you've already been playing with an agentic AI agent. But I guess in this description, you're pointing out the human decision maker still is sort of a final decision maker. Everything funnels up to this top manager, and this human is doing this. Is that the way that you guys think about agentic AI when you're deploying it in practice, Manju? You were talking about this task automation, that you're going to have human decision makers at the top.
Yeah, when you think about these multi-agent deployments, the reality is very different than what it sounds or being said in the media. Humans have a bigger role. The conversation shifts from, hey, here is a productivity gain of 40%, 60%, which is true, because some tasks can be done faster and so on. Immediately the next conversation that happens is, what do we do with this 40, 60%? And then the bigger picture of, we have a 30, 40% planning error. Can I bring it down by 10, 20%? Because that improves my revenue. So now suddenly what you thought is like people have less work actually ends up becoming creating new work, because now you see the possibilities of dropping those planning errors. And in my job, I'm fortunate to be working alongside Google to be deploying these multi-agent architectures. And any given day, it could be a Unilever or Coca-Cola or whoever is posing a question to Google, and that's coming to us. And they want to know the ground realities of connecting the dots. And from technology, it shifts all the way back to what Nick was talking in his keynote about policies, because these large enterprises, their hundreds of millions of dollars of inventory are at risk based on these policy changes. From the policy, it starts getting into the enterprise reality of what it takes to deploy these multi-agent architecture. And as you can imagine, many of these big corporations, they have organizations defined for data, AI, and there's a chief supply chain officer, there's a CFO, and all these folks have different levels of understandings of AI and what AI agents can do. And thanks to many of the big consulting companies who give them hundreds of pages of PDF, but those things come to us and say, now, how does this look in reality? And sometimes they come to us with very specific numbers. I want 40 agents. And my immediate question is, what exactly are they going to do? And they don't necessarily have the full picture, but they have a vision. Some have better vision than other. But reality, it comes, what is critical is, do you truly understand what these agents, you want even two of them, you want them to do? Do you understand when they start interacting what they can and cannot do? Do you understand the guardrails? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And it's important that you don't go too far ahead and then deal with the implications, but realize that the process changes, that what Gene was talking about, right? And because there's a lot of people aspect of process aspects involved, it's not as binary as it looks, that agents will come in and people will lose jobs. And some cases, yes, stenographers lost jobs because PCs came in, and some programmers will lose jobs. And that is if they don't catch up to use and build agents and the AI the right way and still stick to the old programming methods. But coming back to the human in the loop, and it's really that for the folks in this room, right, as in taking your business domain and blending with technology and communicating that well, put a solution architect or whatever hat you want, but that is a very critical skill. And there's a lot more to do because the inefficiency in supply chain, like I think Nick mentioned, I don't remember whether it was a board meeting or in the session yesterday, 40% of food is wasted just because the food is not in front of the right person or in the right plate. Think about what you can do when you just change that one metric. And these enterprises we are talking about, when the policies change, when the metrics are affected, the amount of math they have to do is incredibly high in volume. So they have to give up and start adopting these new capabilities.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm hearing a couple of things to kind of distill this down. One thing I'm hearing about is not this human out of the loop thing, which I think is one of the big pieces of hype we hear about agentic AI, where we're just going to automate everything and walk away and have wonderful time in Tahiti, but rather that we do need to educate human decision makers to kind of oversee these processes. I'm curious to hear from you, Bethany. Like, are there processes, as we're talking about task automation, that you think should never be devoid of a human, that there always needs to be a human involved? And how do you think about that?
Good question. Oh, can you hear me? Is this on? Okay. Hello. I'm going to zoom out for a second before I get into your question. Going back to the definition piece for a second of what agentic AI is, and kind of from a high level, how are regulators and policymakers thinking about how to grapple with this? There's no consensus definition from a policy and regulatory standpoint of what agentic AI even is. I think it's great that we had the experts here kind of define it in their specific context, but there's no consensus definition for what even AI is from a policy and regulatory context. So for companies who are trying to develop and deploy these systems in a smart and responsible way, there's concerns that if there's a fragmented approach for trying to regulate these technologies, that it makes a really challenging operating environment for these companies who are trying to comply. So right now we have a very fragmented global landscape around AI. At the state level, we've had over 1,000 individual bills introduced that will regulate AI in some form or another. And while not all of those are going to pass and go through, there's a broader concern of how is this going to impact companies who are in the space of agentic AI if we ended up having a patchwork of, say, 50 different laws and regulations trying to address the harms and concerns around agentic AI. Now, on the human in the loop conversation, the organization that I work with, the Software and Information Industry Association, we represent a lot of companies who are both developing and deploying AI in many sectors and many contexts. We believe in the the idea of focusing on the high risk impacts of this technology rather than simply regulating the technology itself. And in that case as well, I think every sector has specific needs in terms of what's going to be required for human in the loop. So from a policy standpoint, we encourage lawmakers to consider that, in that we don't want human in the loop to be considered in a blanket way across, supply chain and financial services and healthcare. There's going to be very specific use case needs associated with supply chain that are different from healthcare, et cetera. And so that's what we encourage, is focusing on the risk and focusing on sector specific outcomes. I think there's a lot of narrative and hype around concerns around the AI in general and the agentic AI. Just raise of hands of people in the audience. How many of you are really excited about agentic AI just from what you know and what you've heard so far? Great. And on the flip side, how many of you have some skepticism and maybe some concerns around it? Okay. I feel like it was about half and half. And so that's what the work I'm trying to do in grappling with all of these questions and engaging industry, academia, and policymakers together to try and figure out, okay, what are the bounds between these areas, and how do we allow innovation to flourish without hindering the ability for innovators in the agentic AI space to prevail.
This is awesome because it's a great segue to my next topic, which is that I think we're just flagging, Bethany, is that we really need to think about when humans are involved in decisions in an industry-specific way, that it's very contextual. And so I wanted to flag some stuff for a supply chain audience. And I think if I asked the group, to talk about when you think you need human oversight in supply chain applications, they're going to mention things like risk. They're going to mention things like regulatory requirements. And I wanted to rack my brains for some more interesting things for the panel to talk about. So I have two examples that I want to share, and I would love to have people's thoughts about. So the first is, I think, one we've all heard about, which was when Google's Gemini's initial image generation tool was pulled for being deemed too woke, for generating images of, Black U.S. all of the U.S. presidents were Black. If you asked it to generate images, some were women, things like this, that kind of leaned in a way that led to hallucinations that perceived to align with a particular liberal viewpoint. In particular, in context of Manish, when you're talking about generating AI campaigns for marketing, right? And how does this look like, and how do we think about this? And then the second one I wanted to talk about is price collusion, where there's been great evidence and research lately about having agentic systems that set prices or engage in ordering decisions for inventory. And like Manju was pointing out, even if you have two of them, do you really understand how they're going to talk? And that we've seen evidence that unintentionally, two separate agentic AIs might engage in price collusion in a way that's illegal. So given these kinds of subtle examples that emerge, how do you start thinking about these broader questions as a panel? I'll leave it open to everybody about how we think about regulating or risk mitigating agentic AI deployments.
Yeah, if I can use the analogy of Tesla, which I drive, you don't see a lot of distinction between AI and a human. Human always has the burden, even if you use your autopilot and full FSD and so on. Right? So on the same principles, if you apply agentic AI in your business function, the important thing to realize is AI, and Bethany can talk more about this as well, it's not independent on its own. You can't just blame AI and get away from it, because ultimately you are accountable for the job and the profit and the margin and the actions you take, whether to store or move your inventory, even if AI did the action for you. So having said that, it's change management happens to be the hardest part. And we had one example of a toilet manufacturing company in Colombia where what used to take 3 hours for them to determine an order's availability date and issue a purchase order was now taking 10 seconds. The CEO immediately jumps in and says, if you could do this, you're saving us tens of millions of dollars. What else can you do? But just to get that one question to answer in 10 seconds and reliably took us 6 months. And after that, it took many months to convince people to start relying on it. So which means you really have to think about change management and sequence it right.
Yeah, just to add on that from the company perspective, you mentioned, right, my company is AI marketing. So we will very easily go from text to ad for you, for your brand. And all sorts of issues can come up if the underlying model that you're using is giving you images that are either inappropriate or against your guidelines in some manner, right? And so I think at this point, it's really important to have the right guardrails up. And this is just like a basic business process thing. And this is why when people talk about AI kind of taking all of the jobs and everything, I'm very much in the camp that there will just be new jobs that emerge. Like, I don't think we could have imagined that this job would exist, right? Like 2 years ago, even, right? Because ChatGPT came out like 3 years ago. It's crazy. 2 years ago, so more new stuff like that will happen, and the business will evolve and change. But ultimately, you're more efficient and you're able to do better work if you have the right guardrails in place.
Awesome. This also segues really nicely, and then I'm going to kick it to Tess because I know this is for you. So in some sense, like we've heard this discussion of guardrails on these individual agents, right? That was just brought up, and this idea of managing the individual agents. How do you think about when you have sub agents that are good enough? Right? If you're going to say that I want an agentic AI to manage my inventory and I have a sub agent responsible for forecasting and another sub agent responsible for coordinating logistics, when you've done these deployments, tests, right? So when you've done these deployments, how do you think about, are those agents actually good enough for this task?
That's a great question. I think right now I just want to give an overview. There are two types of agents on the market. The first one is horizontal agents, meaning that are agents for general purpose. And the second one is a vertical agents for specific industry. So in my point of view, from what we work with the client's needs are very specific and customized. So I think the number one thing to really make those sub agents work is to customize your agents towards the pain point of the client. So let me give you an example for one of the manufacturer client we're working with. They do a manufacture of doors in North Carolina, and their pain point is that they have a lot of human errors during their sales process. And in the beginning, we were trying to sell them to like a standardized sales agent, product. But then we realized it's not the best solution for them because, from a cost perspective, there's no reason for them to adopt like a more expensive, completely new sales system as they already have like a traditional sales portal. So the solution we gave it to them is that we tailored a solution that we built a co-pilot agents to audit whatever human errors that happening while they were typing into their original system. So what I'm saying is, although we might be very idealistic that we want to develop agentic product to replace the whatever the legacy systems, but I think the more feasible solution is that we develop something that tailored to whatever their pain point and really targeting their customized needs.
I love this answer because this goes back to this analogy we had earlier of thinking of agentic AI as like the orchestra conductor and the agents as the musicians. Kind of what you're speaking to, Tess, is like in some sense, if the musicians are terrible, it doesn't matter how good the conductor is. And instead of trying to hire and like rebuild great musicians, maybe you build the band around the successes that you already have, right? So if you have a really strong wind section, you build around that wind section. This is a great idea. I like this a lot. I would love to just kind of push a little bit more on developing good agents. What have you seen kind of across the board as the obstacles to having good sub agents in developing good sub agents for your deployments, right? So not even thinking about the orchestra, but like what makes a great musician? What are specific examples of sub agents that you've seen that work really well? What are obstacles to creating them? Things like that.
So and I say this in a very generic way. Of course, there's complexity in model tuning and all those. Creating agents is the easy part. It's fairly easy to understand. There is development kits that are readily available. So technology is only 30% of the work. But it's really taking the agent that you created, even with few tasks, and packaging that with how does it fit into the process, and will the humans accept it? If they accept it, what does it take? Do they have explainability and transparency into what the agents are doing? And if they see that when an agent makes a mistake, is there a shared sense of responsibility built with the sub agent and the person? And at least in our context, we try to map person to person. We build a parallel organization hierarchy for the problem we solve. So for example, if you work on a supply chain organization and marketing group, so there's one agent for marketing running the ads and another agent for positioning inventory for the ads they run. Of course, there's a demand forecasting in between. We map that to specific people and the agents so that there is no lack of this ambiguity that I gave it to AI and I don't know what it did. But it's like you own this agent and you are the one who agreed on these tasks the agent should perform, and there's transparency. And the thing is, when you let these 2 or 3 agents work with each other, they're going to do some things different than what you thought, because we all have biases, and whether it's forecasting or inventory positioning or the ads that are run and so on. And when you let them work with each other and load all the data into a single database, they have a lot more visibility and capacity to scan data at a scale that we find it hard to imagine, because as planners, you have limitations on how much time you have in a day and how much you can scan and analyze and contextualize and reason and so on. But here, it's really about turning on your compute and memory and increase it. In one instance, for a fashion company, we ran like 5,000 models in like 3 hours, and it came back with results which, even though they had run like 6 softwares or 7 softwares before and retired them, this one did an extraordinary amount of work and came back in 3 hours. And it took us many days to understand why it recommended ads a certain way, and which is contrary to the beliefs of the marketing team and the inventory. And when we went through the answers, it was more right than wrong, which means tens of millions of dollars of worth of ads were run where it was not really yielding results the way they thought, because it was segregated. In the old world, it is segregated between humans, and those are different departments, and there's always a gray area between departments. But now the gray area is fading away.
Tess, it seemed like you wanted to add to this.
Yeah, so I just want to add, I really agree with Manju what just said, and I just want to add a layer from a technology perspective, that in order for sub-agents to really work well, one of the things we do is that we develop a small model distilled from the large language model, because sometimes the hallucination is a really serious problem that would disrupt the behavior or performance of your sub-agents, right? So by having a smaller model and you trained with your specific industry knowledge data, it's really improving. And also with the technique of RL, reinforcement learning, it really brings up the performance of the agent for us.
Great. So I want to build on something here that I think is subtle and worthwhile to think about, which is that, Manju, you said that like you think about these deployments as mirroring organizational hierarchy. So there's an existing human organizational hierarchy, and you assign agents to portions of that, and they own those agents. This is a choice, right? In a cross-functional sense, when AI is making these cross-functional choices, who owns it? And the idea that I'm going to have it divvied up and owned separately is different than having, a dedicated AI team that does this. How do you think about that choice? Why do you choose that structure over a dedicated team? Do we think that there's pros and cons? What do you see as some of the drawbacks? Things like that.
So structuring organization, where should AI sit? Who is accountable for it when something goes wrong? Who'll take the blame? All of these are debates that are going on. I've lived in Bay Area for 25 years. This is probably the most disruptive year I've seen. Obviously, the labor is very expensive. There is a push to do more and more efficiency gain out of AI. And when we think about now, what is the organization implication? Leaders, when you talk to them, they're careful when it's a one-on-one setting versus a broader setting. you kind of hear two different things, right? In a one-on-one setting, they're very blunt to say, I have a mandate to cut 30% of the people. What do I do, right? And if I do that, what will the organization look like? Or should I structure the organization a certain way? And they're looking for a very clear answer. And the reality is AI is already everywhere. Not to give you, not to don't misinterpret when I say it's like COVID. It's like already everywhere, right? You can't separate AI as a separate organization and try to put all the accountability. Some companies do that, but eventually that AI layer will collapse with the data layer. The data layer will collapse with the infra layer, because I was sitting with a $10 billion revenue infrastructure head who runs like 15 data centers. And they're like, this AI team is running, which is costing me 4 or 5 times more than compared to last year. What the hell are they doing, right? And it's really about running more mathematics, right? At the end of the day, somebody chose to run more mathematics, and that's going to run more infrastructure. And now that also leads to different kind of decisions. What it means is companies are going to struggle to define AI and AI fitting into the organization. Some will do better than others. How many of them define an internet organization today? You don't hear somebody having an internet organization. Why should an AI organization or an AI team exist? But it should be at every level. Still, for at least in the interim period, there'll be organizations formed. But for us, when it comes to agents, it's really about an individual role, the task, and how do these roles report. If you mimic that with agents, so that there is it's not like two separate things, right? You can start relating it like a digital twin, but at an agent level.
Manish, it seemed like you wanted. Oh, sorry, Bethany, you want to add something there?
Yeah, so kind of bringing this back to a macro level perspective and how, regulators may be thinking about this. There's a lot of legal liability questions in terms of who is liable when the AI agent goes rogue, right? And especially when you're thinking about these like multi-agent interactions, that adds a whole nother layer of like who is liable, and another layer of like potential security risks or data breach risks, right? And so those are the things that I'm thinking about. And one step that can be taken, I think it's great that you discussed mapping and kind of these governance structures that you all have in place, but there's no industry-wide consensus-driven voluntary standards or frameworks that really address this specifically within like the agentic AI ecosystem or stack. And so something that my organization is advocating for is for more cross collaboration between all sectors, so government, industry, civil society, and academia, to work together to kind of build out, okay, what are these governance standards or frameworks that would be purely voluntary, but a baseline for organizations to look to as they are deploying AI agents throughout the organization. And to the point of like, what role do different folks have in that stack? I think there is, more work to be done and more clarity that can be had around developing out these standards. The National Institutes for Standards and Technology, NIST, is beginning to do some of this work. We have something called the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, but it doesn't dive into AI agents as much as it could. And so there's processes to begin, revising this and adding on to it. And I think it's important to have smaller organizations and startups really involved in those conversations as well. I don't think these standards should be, purely developed by the largest industry players. We think as an industry association, there's a role for all levels of engagement across stakeholder groups to be involved in really setting the stage here.
She looked like, did you want to add something there? Okay, good. Okay. So I like this a lot because I think a lot about organizational governance. And I do think that there's a lot of unanswered questions, for example, about these collusion between agents or who is legally responsible for the decisions these make. I want to back up to one thing that came up in Manju's answer, which was about this workforce framing. Right, the CEO that comes in and tells you quietly, I need to cut 30% of my staff, right? And it connects nicely to something Manish said earlier, which is like, I don't think that the jobs are going away. I think that there are different jobs. And so I think we often talk about agentic AI as a double-edged sword, right? We see that there's a possibility for AI to take off tasks from our plate, which seemingly seems to make an option for workforce reduction. But then we also see this task shifting of the kinds of questions that you have to ask as a human being monitoring these guardrails and things. So I guess the question I want to point is for the students, like there's a ton of students right now in this audience that are all studying to be supply chain professionals, right? What are the things that you would tell them? Should they be going to Nick and asking for their money back and going and enroll in CS classes? Should they be focusing their studies in particular ways? What do you think is the skills they should develop now to be successful in this new workforce?
I have a thought on that. They should go and ask Nick for their money. No, I'm kidding. I have a strong opinion on students right now. I think it's one of the most amazing times to be entering the job force because you can use all these new tools, all the AI like based tools, to be like significantly better than other folks who are not using them. It's like right, you use ChatGPT probably if you're a student, right? You've probably used it in some manner to do your schoolwork or like I don't know, do stuff and like live. And it's and if you apply that native knowledge and to your actual work, whatever vertical it is, you don't have to be a computer science major like you mentioned. You could be supply chain professional, but using the latest AI tooling, you are going to be mega valuable to that organization. And like I mentioned before about like the new wave of jobs, right? It's going to be using these tools and then having teams of people to manage the tools, manage the agents, right? And so you can almost think of it as like before AI, it was like writing an essay with pen and paper or like doing math with pen and paper. And now with AI, it's like the equivalent of having Excel. It's like it's another tool that you're able to use. So that would be my advice. Frame yourself as an AI native, whatever vertical, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, sure. I agree with all of that. I'll just say generally, I think the narrative that like AI is going to take away jobs is potentially a harmful narrative. I think it's a legitimate concern to weigh how society will shift here. But I agree that students should feel very curious and very optimistic about the future that this technology will create. I think it's good to continue to ask questions. And, I think there's kind of two camps. There's people who are diving full into AI and not really thinking about the risks. And then there's people who are kind of scared of AI because of the risks. And I think it's important to walk a fine line in the middle and find opportunities to experiment with a variety of tools, both in your daily life, but also maybe in your school context to the extent that you can. But yes, I think this should be a very encouraging time, and I think it's important to remain optimistic, but also just continue to be curious about the limitations associated with the technology too.
Yeah, my word of advice is don't distinguish between a Python program and an email you're drafting. Both can be done by vibe coding. Vibe coding is you narrate something, it'll create a program and so on. So you don't need to know the syntax. In the I'll call the previous generation, it is like your specialized skills, programmers and so on. Today, none of us call ourselves as stenographers, but we all type. So think of programming collapsing into your whatever domain related work, supply chain work that you do. So don't distinguish yourself. I am a programmer, I'm not a programmer. So absolutely learn programming. If you want to build career in programming, you have to be super specialized to make the big money. Otherwise, everybody should know programming like math, right? But will just being an average programmer get the premium what has been paid in the last 3 decades? No, it won't. It's going to drop, right? So programming is a necessary skill. But having said that, now you have the power to be able to program and write a document and produce a research report all in your hand. Now, what would you do with it? I'll give you a real world example. In December, we were doing a research about a very popular shoe brand company. In December, we didn't know exactly how this tariff situation will impact, and we estimated their inventory risk as of that day based on public information was $140 million. And by the time we hit April, when the announcements came out, and we did the analysis again, and this is all purely public information, it came up to roughly around 500 million. And we sent that information to the chief supply chain officer, the company, and they wanted to know exactly how and all those, right? And we kind of gave a one-pager and said, this is why we think, are we right or wrong? And then they were like, yeah, you're very close to the range. That's why we wanted to know how. Now the question is, can you come and deploy a model to help fix it? And at that time, the reality is it's not about deploying a model. That's, like I said, that's the easy part. Now, are you ready to change the organization? Are you ready to introduce the results? Are you ready to move your inventory differently or rank your suppliers differently? If the answer is no, you're going to deploy a technology, and I have to be very open to Google about this, right? They're going to say Google technology didn't work, right? The reality is the change management and the people in the process have not caught up, and they will need 6 months to 1 year unless you have a leadership buy-in who truly understands how dramatic a change this is. We are just going to use a technology and make it a guinea pig. Technology has been running for 10 years in Uber, and it's an optimization that has been proven at a planet scale, right? There are many such examples you have. The question is, at an enterprise level, are you ready for the change? And this team and this group of students who is getting into the workforce now should be questioning these enterprises. That's a skill to acquire. Why can't you reconfigure your supply chain network every single day? I know it probably costs you a lot of money, but you have the compute and memory and data available in whatever format. It's a possibility. I'm not saying reconfigure your supply chain network and drive your suppliers crazy, but you have to push the boundaries on this.
So I just want to add a little bit on the kind of talent that we're looking for in the from a AI perspective. I think it's more important for the students to have like a very interdisciplinary approach. Like you can really work within a disciplinary team rather than just within your own small industry domain. So another thing I think is very important is that you really has to be a fast learner. That because the AI is evolving so fast, and when we are trying to find the right talent for our company, we really value the people who pick up things fast and be able to do something innovative rather than just focus on like the traditional corporate culture, which is very focused on a certain specific area. So I guess that's kind of my suggestion to the students.
Great, and we're going to be the first panel in the history of the Global Supply Chain Summit to end on time. So in that spirit, I want to end with one question, which is your one weird trick, right? So everybody has their weird trick that they're using AI for right now, whether it be in their personal life, private life, as an organization. What's one thing you can share with the audience that they can go away and do tomorrow or start doing tomorrow with AI that you think will make a real difference? What's your one weird trick?
I can go. Super basic, but everyone probably uses ChatGPT to write emails or write stuff, code. You can ask it to give you 3 different versions of what you were intending, and then you can tell it that it's say that was 5 out of 10. Give me 10 out of 10. It normally and then you say think harder, and that literally does work.
Great.
That's a nice weird trick.
But do better prompt. Okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing too, within a business context, if you're able to, I know every business is different in terms of the privacy with the data and everything, but as much as possible, if you're able to upload, say, like a PDF or like a longer document around the context of what you believe good looks like, and use examples, specific examples. It's not just like generic, like this is how it should, this is the language or this is the knowledge, but like specific examples of what good looks like, the AI will give you incredible responses.
Yeah, I don't know how many of you are already familiar with, you can have predefined agents, simple agents, or Gemini gems as they call it. You can create your own agents. So the one trick that I use is I ask question to one agent, gives me an answer. Let's say I'm researching about a company, about how to reduce their inventory carrying costs. Then I take that answer, I go to a different agent and ask whether that agent give the right answer, what mistakes did it make, and it's going to tell you a bunch of things. Then I'm going to combine both of them, my own domain knowledge, what I know about the company, then I'm going to put my point of view, and I'll go give it to a third agent, or it could be a prompt, and say condense this to 100 words, because people's attention is quite limited these days. It condenses it to 100 words that will really carry the impact, and then you tweak it and send it, and your chances of the reaction is much higher. And it's also easier for you to articulate the story later when they come back. But these agents would have produced like 40 to 80 page reports. So you now store it in a place where if they come back with a follow-up question, the real person comes back with a follow-up question, you're talking to these agents saying, hey, who answered this and where did it come from and so on, right? Because you do need to substantiate.
I have an example in the stocks trading. It's not related to supply chain, but one of the trick is that when you are trying to look at a stock, sometimes you can have an agent using two agents using two different large language models, and one's go long and one go short, and you can have them debate. And sometimes you can get the best result. And I did earn some money with that trick on stock market.
I don't know that I have a weird trick, but I'll end on my advice to just experiment with as many tools as possible and build in time to your day or your week to actually experiment with the tools. I think that's how we begin to build more trust in the technology as users, is to actually experiment with it ourselves.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. This has been really great food for thought. If we could please thank the panel. And I'm going to turn it back.
All right, thank you so much.